introducing the end of April featured light novels. So this month, we will introduce the new light novels that will be released in late April. We will introduce all the light novels that will be released from April 20th to the end of the month. This time, it will be delivered a large volume of 60 works in total. I wonder what kind of light novels will be released from now on. I'll be talking about which new light novels I recommend and be picking up some light novels that person like, so please use them as a reference when looking for recommendations. So let's get it started. First of all, let's take a look at 12 books which will be released on April 20th. Water Attribute Magician Second Duty Square Countries Volume 3, in conjunction with the popular fantasy book Part 1, which depicts the carefree adventures of the strongest water magician. This is it. The series has reached its 10th volume, and the cumulative total of the series has exceeded over 300,000 copies. I started a new game. I am the strongest, even though there's no mission. Volume 9. It's a fantasy game that is gaining fame as a balance breaker in the VMMRO world. The latest volume is a drama. A special edition CD will be also released at the same time. The Unfortunate Prince is a Genius Alchemist, Volume 4. A different world fantasy where the main character, a prince who is in an unfortunate position, takes control of the empire for his younger brother. It seems that there is also a plan in the works to make into a manga adaptation. Little Witch at the Edge of the Forest, Volume 3, a road story about a camp-hole girl with top-notch skills who takes to the world. It seems like the latest volume will be about taking on an unknown mountain that attacks the kingdom. This is a story about a stepping stone who believes that he is the main character, but he ends up winning because he mistakes the main character as a stepping stone. Volume 3. The title is extremely confusing. The main character is reincarnated as a small fry character in the game world and becomes the strongest through his efforts. Please note that this is only available as an ebook. Vampire Writer, the VMMRVG, Volume 2. A transplanted series game world in which a vampire who lives 900 years plays a VMMO game, which you can sum off and an interesting setting that combines a vampire machine and a VRMOO. An interesting setting shines through. I thought it was my second life, but it was actually my third, Volume 2. A timely fantasy in which a nobleman who lost everything he gains, but regains the memories of his previous lives. Through history is rewritten to protect his family and territory. Beginner campers reincarnation into another world. Somehow I survived with skills of camping. A new camp fantasy in which the main character who acquired the skill of sightseeing throws all his energy into his hobby of camping. It seems like there are plenty of gourmet elements as well. When I rescued a little girl who was lost in the field, she turned out to be a dryad, aiming for a slow life by growing vegetables and streaming videos. A story about a slow life in the countryside where a former company employee who has a mental breakdown picks up a mysterious monster girl in the first volume. A story about a slow life in the countryside. It seems like there is also a distribution service. I guess it's a recent trend. And with that, this is the new releases from Toho Books. From Dangan Bunko, Murder of the Seven Kingdoms, Volume 1, a story about a killer that serves countries and took them down through war. This is Shuichi Nimaru's first ever story from a newly established publisher. War and politics combine together to make world peace. It seems like it's an interesting genre that as good as a romance love story that never fails. Second Moon Volume 1, an isekai story of a magic warrior dies and reincarnates as a robot vacuum cleaner and being rescued by a girl. Sci-fi and fantasy was mixed into this book. Looks like very intriguing to try it out. The protagonist's design was also cool. Funeral Parade of Blades, Samurai Death Parade Volume 1, a zombie apocalypse fantasy story about a team of different classes takes on a mission to procure scarce supplies and kill corpses, aka zombies and monsters. Outbreak Company and Chiaika, the Coffin Princess Ichiro Sakaki, returns for a new twist and genre that is definitely wanted to craving for more. Rojura Strangers Volume 1, a story about a high school students, agents, sorcerers, and couriers having living their own lives now forced to save the world from a common enemy. I guess modern sorcery are now an amazing trend due to its popularity. Next, let's check out MF Books' new works, released on April 24th. The only magician in the world will be happy as a court alchemist. Her true power is a secret, Volume 3. This is a romantic comedy fantasy where the only heroine who can use magic plays as an active role. This series concludes its ending this time. Bottom tier old man living the easy life in another world with cheat powers, Volume 2. An old man who was a bottom office worker is reincarnated in another world and lives as an adventurer. The latest slow life fantasy volume seems to be set in the land of elves. The cover also features a lot of elf heroines. The Prince of Disaster travels with a lonely lovely maid, Volume 1. A prince who was forced to play the role of a cursed child bids farewell to his parents' home and begins a journey with a maid girl. A new fantasy, it seems. It looks like it's going to be a relaxing pure love story about traveling. After a long time, I had a medical checkup and my stats were the strongest. An exiled old man lives as an adventurer, aims to become a hero, Volume 1. A reversal fantasy in which the main character, an old man, develops his skills at an old age. An accelerating performance with the cheats of an old man adventurer. It looks like you'll be able to enjoy an easy life like an old man. Venus Mission Volume 1. This work begins with the main character, who was an assassin in the real world, begins moving to another world. This is a noteworthy work. The reason for the summoning is a 32-face assassin hero of a high school student who was summoned by a class from Japan. The Japanese who have been summoned as a hero are causing chaos in another world with their cheat abilities, so it seems like the protagonists have been given a white arrow to deal with. It seems quite interesting to take on the challenge alone. The above is the new issue for MF Books. Next one will be released on April 25th. Next up is the new releases from MF Bunko J, Deshax Bunko, Overlap Bunko, and Novels and Brave Bunko released on April 25th. Let's start with MF Bunko J, Volume 15 of the Demon Sword Master of Excalibur Academy, the latest edition of the Sword Fantasy series, which begins with the strongest demon lord being reincarnated in the future as a 10-year-old. This is of course a work that deserves attention. It was also made into an anime last year. There was a time when there was a great anime version of School Battle Fantasy, but recently it has become less popular, so I think there are many anime fans who feel nostalgic about it. The truth of the world is also revealed, and the final battle finally comes in the latest volume. The story seems to be accelerating towards the climax, and there are 15 volumes, which is quite a lot, so it may be possible that this story will be completed during the rush, so fans of the series will be interested in the latest volume. I need to check it out how it will develop. Playing Death Games to Put Food on the Table Volume 6. This work, which depicts the life of a lost girl who challenges the death game of her own will and lives on the prize money, is a popular work with game elements, but is one of the most popular works that have been transplanted. This is a game-based novel, of course. This is a work that deserves attention. There are various death games that appear, but the latest edition features a death game that the main character Yuki challenges for the first time. It seems that episodes from the past will also be recorded, since the character has been around quite a bit at some point. I'm curious to see how it turned out in the first game. This series has the potential to be made into an anime in the future. If you are interested in death games, you should check it out. I Deceived the Blue Volume 2. The youthful graphical story of this work, which begins after winning the Excellence Award at the Light Novel Newcomer Award, is being burned. This is an irresistible series that depicts the pattern of youth being burned through film production. Well, next up is Cheese. This is the latest volume of the youth series based on the Vocaloid songs that started with Goodbye Sengen. This time, it seems that the story depicts the beginning of the previous day of the main story. Goodbye to Multiverse Youth, Connect to the Only You, the second volume of the science fiction youth series in which the boy who had the power to create a parallel world is at the mercy of changes in the world. The latest volume takes us from the future. It seems that new problems will arise due to the presence that has come. Kotoru-chan loves discontinued manga too much. The cover of the first volume has artistic elements and has a unique design. By the way, the author is Kota Nozomi. This new series has been marked as a noteworthy work. The main character of the work is a high school boy from an all-boys school who aspires to be a manga artist. It looks like the story will be about a club junior who loves a discontinued manga, who struggles every day to make a name for herself through the matter. Why the heroine is a discontinued manga? I'm kinda curious if it has been changed to Aiko. Also, the older heroine, no, this is rare. I've always had an older heroine lately, so this is a surprise. I'm sorry, but it has quite a unique setting. It's a shiny new product, so I naturally recommend it. Second Life After Being a Hero, but it might be fun to serve to food to children, Volume 1. This is a new work in a book size, released by Bunko J. Speaking of the author Masaru Shimamura, he is known for the Gun Parade series and Marginal Operation. I'm good at hard war stories such as series, but this time it's a gourmet fantasy with a slow lifestyle, so I'm interested in this one. Also, this is a work to watch. The main character of the magical work has a legendary military career. He's a proud former Navy admiral, but somehow an elf boy and a girl attends his 4th year. It seems like the plot is going to be a bit unclear, with an old man and a toddler becoming classmates when they enter school. Furthermore, the main character serves Navy prepared food to win hearts of the elf children, which is quite unique. It looks like it's going to be a unique story, and it's going to be quite a unique fantasy among Shibamura Sensei's work, so I think this is going to be a new work that you won't want to miss. That's all for Bunko J's new book. Next up, from X Bunko, the Irregular of the Royal Academy of Magic Volume 6, a battle fantasy in which a former underworld assassin is unparalleled in a school full of aristocrats. Due to the popular of the manga version, this series has sold a total of 1.15 million copies. I thought I had found a fiancé, but she turned out to be the famous villain lady at school. So what should I do? Volume 4. A school youth romance comedy that starts with a girl who has excellent grades and a perfect girl. The title says it's called a villainess, but she uses it as a weapon and gets spoiled around from her. It feels like a pure love romantic comedy with a heroine who is being treated like a nuisance. Succubus 48 Moves Volume 2. This is an erotic comedy fantasy with an outrageous setting in which succubuses and succubi succubuses do erotic things in order to save the world. It's more straightforward erotic than I imagined, and it's challenging the limits of a light novel. When I was consulting with my best friend about love with the most beautiful girl in school, she suddenly became closer to me than anyone else. It's a youth romantic comedy about getting closer to a girl. The heroine seems to be a tsundere type. The Demon King is the Hero's Cute Wife Volume 4. This is also a work that won the Silver Prize at the Newcomers Award, a pure love fantasy where a hero is betrayed by his friends and killed by a bomb just before the final battle with the Demon King, and the Demon King rescues him and begin live together. It seems like it will be a story to stop the war between the tribes. That's about the lineup for the Bunko. Next up, from Overlap Bunko. Next, let's take a look at the new releases from Overlap Bunko and Overlap novels. Let's start with Overlap Bunko, Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash Volume 20. Jumonji Our Sensei's latest edition of the adventure fantasy of a different world. The relentless otherworld as a force. This is a series that depicts the vividly lives of the characters. This is a title that is naturally attracting attention. The previous volume was released in June 2022, so this was the first new book in about 2 years. Well, I've been waiting for quite a while now. The story is currently moving towards its conclusion, and the final battle takes place in a world that has changed dramatically. It looks like Grimgar is about to start, but it's also being made into an anime. The story unfolds in a way that you won't imagine from the way it's run, or even if you've seen the anime in the past. I think it's good. I think it's a good idea to check out the inside of the original. The latest edition of the fantasy conquering a different world with a lonely protagonist starting with a class summon. The main character's tension is unique, so it's easy to choose who reads it. It's a light novel, but the anime was also released not too while ago. A fantasy series in which game junkie high school student uses weak skills to fool clearing in another world under a goddess with zero believers. Volume 12. The latest edition is a final battle to challenge the strongest demon, Lord. The climax is almost here. The magician who was always said to be incompetent is actually the strongest in the world, but he didn't realize it because he was in prison. Volume 5. The world's strongest magician who is naive becomes incomparable without realizing it. This is a thrilling fantasy story full of chunibyo. A childhood friend reunited after 10 years acts Dere Dere with Me Volume 4. The story begins when the main character Arasawa, a former company slave who returns to his hometown from Tokyo, meets a mysterious, beautiful girl, a high school girl of a childhood friend. It's a slapstick romantic comedy about a younger heroine being approached with an age difference guy. My Wife in the Web Game is a Popular Idol Volume 4, a youth romantic comedy that begins when it is discovered that online game's wife is a popular idol whom she admires and is also a classmate. It's a series that defined how web games can make you a husband and with a wife inside a virtual world and also in a real world. One day out of the blue, I got a Gal's Forgiving Wife Volume 3. This is a series where you can enjoy a classic romantic comedy between a negative protagonist and a positive heroine. It's an enjoyable series. A 20-year-old game streamer who forgets to turn off his stream and ends up being found out as a good guy. Volume 2. A romantic comedy about a streamer who is a VTuber when it turns out that the main character who streams a troll game to support his family is actually a nice person. A beautiful British girl known as a solitary flower became clumsily spoiled when she became my sister-in-law. Volume 1. a new romantic comedy in the romance series that begins with a classmate becoming a righteous person. While living under one roof, a cool heroine emerges. The Villainess Doesn't Speak, Volume 1. The heroine realizes that she is being reincarnated as the villainess from the game. It's a secret battle fantasy where she uses her genius magic and intelligence to destroy her doomed destiny. The main character, it seems to like he can't make a sound because of his illness, but it seems to have mastered magic that and would be unparalleled. This is the new book from Overlap Bunko. Next up in the lineup, Overlap Novels, Volume 5 of The Happy Story of a Twisted Lord, a sick-child management fantasy in which an exiled aristocratic boy cultivates a frontier with no good people. This series concludes with this volume. Pet Aristocrat seems to open up the future, Volume 3, a life overdoing fantasy that begins when a letter from yourself 20 years from now is written about what will happen in the future. You can enjoy the story of the arrogant protagonist growing up. Reincarnated Devil's strongest hero plan. The baby he picked up has grown up so well that his father is confused, Volume 3. A battle fantasy in another world where a heroic boy is raised by a Fire 9 demon dragon protagonist. You can also enjoy the pseudo family-like heartwarming story and the protagonist behind the scenes development. A sickly girl gets reincarnated and gets healthy, or the strongest, Volume 1. A school battle fantasy that begins when a girl used to be a girl reincarnates in another world. It seems to be a unique story of a former sickly girl who is ignorant of the world and has powers that were not planned. Above is the new issue of Overlap Novels. So let's take a look at Brave Bunko, High School Hack and Slash Volume 4, a modern dungeon fantasy set in a school with a huge dungeon. It's a story where you conquer a dungeon with your friends, but there are more erotic scenes than expected. Confinement King Volume 3, an immoral story that uses the ability to create a room in an empty space, begins to revenge through money exchange and brainwashing. As it is a book version of Nocturne novels, it is almost a R18 daily work. And with that, this is Brave Bunko's new book lineup that is on sale on April 26. Next, let's look at the release series from Famitsu Bunko. VTuber childhood friend and a voice actor childhood friend are too dangerous, Volume 1. It's a youthful love comedy with the theme of VTubers and voice actors. This new series has been a noteworthy title. It's about a JK voice actor who can't really break up, the heroine who wanted to be a voice actress but is very popular as a VTuber, and the main character who is a childhood friend of the two. It's a love triangle romantic comedy, so it's pretty interesting relationship story. The heroines are voice actors and VTubers, so they seem to have a bit of a complex with each other, and they probably have feelings for the main character as well. Well, over the past year or so, there have been an increase in the number of light novels about VTubers and streaming, but surprisingly, there has been a love triangle, so I'll be keeping an eye out to see what kind of story the story will be. Next up is Bastard Swordsman Volume 3. This is a slow life fantasy where an old adventurer who wants to laze around in a peace life and lives relaxed life without forcing himself. It's a really slow life speciality, so it's a work that can be read at a leisurely pace. The Wizard and His Merry Friends Volume 2, a fantasy series in which a boy with the ability to cheat has memories of his previous life, lives a slow life with cute fluffy animals. Please note that this is the second volume of the second part, which started with a different title. The hero stole everything from me, so I formed a party with the hero's mother, Volume 1, an adventure in which the main character is exiled from the hero's party and forms a party with the hero's mother. The manga version was released first. It was released as a novel version And with that, this is the new lineup for Famitsu Bunko. Next, let's take a look at Monster Bunko and novels, GCN novels that will be released on April 30th, and as well as the new non-label titles. First, let's start with Monster Bunko and M novels. I'm the weakest person who got prosecuted, but I became too OP after the training in the Woods Dungeon for 100,000 years. Volume 6. A boy who has been treated unfavorably trains 100 years in a dungeon and becomes the strongest. There are quite a few new works from Fantasy Web 1, so it's a must-see for the fans of Web 1. The little boy from another world will create something today as well. Aim to become the upstart with the skill Imagination Creation, Volume 3. A young girl who remembers her past life uses the ability of imagination magic to buy supplies from Japan. It's a heartwarming story about a different world that will make you dance. It's written in a script-like style with the character name before the lines, so it might be a little hard to read. I helped a famous streamer who forgot to turn off the dungeon stream, and I started to get buzzed as a legendary explorer. I, a dark guy, accidentally became unrivaled with ignore rules, which I thought it was a mysterious skill. Volume 2. The main character, an explorer who was ridiculed by those around him, develops cheat abilities and becomes a buzz when he helps a famous dungeon streamer. It's a modern dungeon fantasy. Dungeon streaming titles is the current trend in light novel these days. The life of a missing alchemist in another world. When I was reincarnated, all I had was magic power, so I started Alchemy Volume 1, a new fantasy in another world which the main character, who is good at magic, has a blood vessel. He aims to become an alchemist after overcoming his troubles. You can enjoy the development in which he used his brains to solve problems. That's all about from MF Monster Bunko and the M novel new releases. From GCN novels, enjoy the Demon King's slow life. The hero told me it was impossible to conquer, but it wasn't a dungeon, it's a tomato field. Volume 3. The fantasy cover illustration is probably too bad for YouTube, but I do like to read it because the front cover is too wide open. Since the Adventurers Guild is only allowed people from the age of 12, I decided to read Saba, Volume 3, a fantasy work in which a 9-year-old boy becomes an adventurer as he learns about his age. The solid storyline, in which he steadily grows and increases the things he do, is well received. The unification of the world begins with Hamasedo, the original breakthrough, by playing the final boss of humanity's highest peak. Volume 2 is a different world fantasy story that begins with being reincarnated and uses his knowledge of the original world to fight against the real boss. There's also a comedy of misunderstanding between his friends and feels at it in a good pace. The Boy and the Dragon God, the Prince and his Overprotective Guards, Volume 1. The main character is born with an egg and his friend Aji can transform into a dragon. The main character seems to be a blonde child who is petite. It looks like a boy, not a girl. That's all for GCN novels. And lastly, from the non-labeled titles, that is needed for a Villainous Aristocrat Volume 2, a dark hero fantasy in which the main character reincarnates as a villainous Earl, who is the final boss of the fantasy novel, sets out to avoid a future in which is defeated by a hero. The main character, who acts as a villain but has a hidden kindness, is popular. Zero Weakness Vampire's Territory Reform Volume 2, a consular reform fantasy that begins with the main character, who was an office worker, is reincarnated into the body of a vampire in another world. Peaceful Kokaron between vampires and humanity. With that, this is the new night novels of the non-label type. And with that, I've introduced the new light novels that is now on sale and released on the end of April. It was quite a large volume that is being packed. If there is a light novel that interests you, please buy it. That's all for this video. I'll be summarizing new books again next month, so please take this opportunity to subscribe to the channel. I'd be happy if you could watch another video as well. See you in the next video. Goodbye.